Obsessed, the billionaire CEO hunts down the woman who stole his heart, and his child. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted completely had been hiding a life-changing secret from you for years? Imagine finding out you have a child you never knew existed. A child with your eyes, your smile, your blood. What would you do? He's my son. The words hung in the air between them, sharp and undeniable. Biologically, yes. Her voice was cool, controlled. The voice of a stranger, not the woman who once knew him better than anyone. You had no right to keep him from me. His anger flared hot and bright, the betrayal cutting deeper than any business rival ever could. Didn't I? She turned to face him fully, 5 years of hurt crystallizing in her eyes. You made it abundantly clear that family wasn't in your life plan. That your precious company came first. What was I supposed to do? Become the inconvenient pregnant ex who threatened your perfect arrangement with the senator's daughter? You should have told me. Why? So you could offer financial support while continuing your perfect CEO life. He deserved better than being an obligation. He deserved his father. His voice broke on the last word, revealing the wound beneath his anger. This is the story of a man who built an empire but missed what truly mattered, and the journey to reclaim what he never knew was his. If you've ever wondered whether some mistakes are too big to fix or if true love deserves a second chance, stay with me until the end. And if you believe in the power of redemption, hit that like button and subscribe to Mr. Beaumont's Enchanted Love Stories for more tales that will touch your heart. Our story begins with the moment that changed everything. The photograph sat on Asher Morgan's desk like a time bomb. A casual social media post that shattered his carefully constructed world in an instant. In it, a woman with copper hair smiled at a little boy whose eyes, deep indigo with flecks of gold, were unmistakably Morgan eyes. The same eyes that had stared back at Asher from mirrors his entire life, the same distinctive eyes his father and grandfather had passed down through generations of the Morgan dynasty. Zoom in again, Asher commanded, his voice deceptively calm as his executive assistant enlarged the image on the tablet between them. The plush corner office on the 60th floor of Morgan Tower suddenly felt airless, as though all oxygen had been sucked out by this single digital image. The boy was about 4 years old, with dark curls that matched his mother's coloring, but everything else, the jawline, the eyes, even the way he held himself, was pure Morgan DNA. Asher's blood ran cold, then hot, then ice-cold again as realization crashed through him. Fiona West had disappeared from his life 5 years ago without explanation, taking with her the only piece of his heart he'd ever given away. And apparently, she'd taken something else too. Find them, he said, rising from his leather chair with predatory focus. His Italian suit, custom-tailored to his athletic frame, suddenly felt restrictive, like armor he couldn't shed. Use every resource we have. I want to know where they live, what they do, everything about their lives. And I want it yesterday. Sir, our quarterly board meeting starts in 10 minutes, his assistant, Davis, glanced nervously at his watch. Cancel it. Asher's tone left no room for argument. The billion-dollar deals could wait. The shareholders would have to understand. Nothing matters until I find my son. Davis nodded, backing toward the door. In 5 years as Asher Morgan's right hand, he'd never seen that particular expression on his boss's face, something raw and uncontrolled, something dangerously close to vulnerability. When the door closed, Asher turned to the floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of San Francisco. The city sprawled below him like a kingdom, buildings he owned or had financed dotting the skyline. He'd built an empire that his father had only dreamed of, expanded Morgan Technologies from a modest software firm into a global tech giant worth billions. Yet in that moment, staring at the reflection of his own haunted eyes in the glass, none of it mattered. Somewhere out there was a little boy who shared his blood, his DNA, his legacy. A child he'd never held, never known existed. A child Fiona West had kept from him. The betrayal burned like acid in his chest. As a man who controlled everything in his domain, the thought of something so monumental being hidden from him was intolerable. The need to find them, to confront her, to see the boy with his own eyes became an all-consuming obsession in the space of a heartbeat. Asher Morgan was going hunting. And he never failed to capture what he pursued. The story of how Asher Morgan and Fiona West's paths first crossed begins 5 years earlier, when Asher was at the peak of his professional powers but emotionally bankrupt in ways he hadn't yet recognized. At 32, Asher was the definition of success by any measurable standard. The business world watched his every move. Competitors feared him. Women desired him. Men envied him. He had transformed Morgan Technologies from his father's modest software firm into a global tech giant worth billions. His name appeared regularly on lists of most eligible bachelors, his innovations were celebrated in business magazines, and his ruthless acquisition strategies had earned him the nickname, the Executioner, in Silicon Valley circles. The Morgan name had been respectable in tech circles for a generation under his father's leadership. But Asher had taken it stratospheric, driven by a need to prove himself that stemmed from a childhood spent trying to earn his father's approval. Harold Morgan had been a brilliant programmer but an emotionally distant father, a man who measured love in achievements rather than affection. When cancer took him during Asher's second year at MIT, their relationship had been reduced to quarterly performance reviews of his grades and occasional stiff phone calls about the company's future. The loss left Asher with both a company to save and emotional wounds he buried beneath ambition. His mother, a former socialite who had long ago retreated into a haze of prescribed medications and charity functions, offered little guidance. The message was clear: emotions were messy, inconvenient, and ultimately dangerous. Success, control, and achievement were the only reliable companions. By 32, Asher had internalized those lessons thoroughly. His personal relationships were carefully managed and kept separate from his real life, the empire building that consumed his days and most of his nights. Women came and went, attracted to his power and wealth, but none penetrated the armor he'd constructed around his heart. He told himself he preferred it that way. Emotional entanglements were distractions he couldn't afford. The day he met Fiona West was unremarkable by any standard measure. She wasn't on his calendar. She wasn't someone his assistant had vetted. She wasn't anyone he should have noticed at all. Asher was delivering the keynote address at a tech conference in Boston, presenting Morgan Technologies' new approach to user interface design. The ballroom was packed with industry professionals hanging on his every word, the kind of audience he'd grown accustomed to commanding. The future of user experience lies not in cluttered functionality but in elegant simplicity, he said, gesturing to the sleek design projected behind him. Users don't want to think about how to navigate your product. They want intuition, beauty, and effortless interaction. You're completely wrong about user interface design. The voice came from the middle of the audience, clear and confident. The room went silent as all eyes turned to the petite woman with copper hair who had dared to challenge the great Asher Morgan in the middle of his presentation. "Excuse me," he'd replied, more amused than annoyed. No one challenged him anymore, they were either too intimidated or too eager for his approval. The woman stood, arms crossed over a simple navy dress that spoke of practicality rather than fashion. "Your approach prioritizes aesthetics over function. It looks gorgeous on your presentation slides, but for real people with real needs, it fails." She gestured toward his sleek mock-ups. That minimalist navigation would frustrate most users over 40. The color contrast ratios fail accessibility standards. And the gesture controls you're so proud of would be impossible for users with motor control issues. The audience held their collective breath, waiting for the executioner to eviscerate this unknown woman who dared criticize him publicly. Instead, Asher smiled. "You seem very certain of your assessment, Ms. West. Fiona West. And yes, I am certain. I've spent the last 3 years researching how actual humans interact with technology, not how Silicon Valley thinks they should." Interesting. He studied her for a moment, the intelligence in her green eyes, the stubborn set of her chin, the complete lack of intimidation in her posture. Would you care to elaborate on your research after this session? I find myself curious about these actual humans you've studied. Something like surprise flickered across her face before she nodded. I would, actually. Someone should advocate for them in rooms like this. The rest of his presentation continued without interruption, but Asher found himself glancing repeatedly at the copper-haired woman who had challenged him so fearlessly. When was the last time anyone had told him he was completely wrong about anything? When was the last time he'd met someone who seemed utterly unimpressed by his wealth, power, or reputation? Their meeting after the presentation lasted 3 hours, moving from the conference room to a nearby coffee shop. Fiona West was a UX researcher with a background in cognitive psychology, currently consulting for various tech companies. Her passion for creating technology that served people rather than the other way around was evident in every emphatic gesture, every eloquent argument. The problem with men like you, she said, stirring her third cup of tea, is that you build for the world you see, not the world that exists. Your users aren't all 20-something tech bros with perfect vision and unlimited patience. Men like me? Asher raised an eyebrow. Brilliant but isolated. Surrounded by yes-men. Living in the echo chamber of privilege. She said it matter-of-factly, without malice but without sugarcoating. You've known me for all of 3 hours and you've got me figured out. Am I wrong? Her green eyes challenged him directly. Asher surprised himself by laughing. Not entirely. By the end of their conversation, he'd offered her a consulting position at Morgan Technologies, to bring her user-centered perspective to their design team. He'd expected her to jump at the opportunity. Morgan Technologies was the dream employer for most tech professionals. Instead, she'd hesitated. I value my independence. And I'm not interested in having my research watered down to protect executive egos. I'm not offering you a position to ignore your expertise, Asher had countered. I'm offering it precisely because you weren't afraid to tell me I'm wrong. And if I keep telling you you're wrong, then I expect you to have the data to back it up. She'd considered him for a long moment, then nodded. I'll send you my consulting terms in the morning. My rates aren't cheap. I wouldn't expect them to be. Asher had hired her on the spot as a consultant, fascinated by her mind and her fearlessness. Within 3 months, they were spending every free moment together, her perspective challenging and reshaping his approach to both products and people. Within 6, their professional relationship had evolved into something more complex, though neither put a label on it. Fiona had moved into the guest room of his penthouse. Insisting on her own space despite their increasingly intimate relationship. She maintained her consulting work with other companies, refusing to become exclusively tied to Morgan Technologies. Her independence both frustrated and intrigued him. You're the most infuriating woman I've ever met, he told her one night, watching her work at the dining room table, her copper hair falling in waves around her face as she frowned at her laptop. Because I won't let you dictate my professional choices. She didn't look up from her screen. Because you're brilliant enough to run my entire UX department but you insist on these small-time consulting gigs. Now she did look up, her expression thoughtful. Those small-time gigs keep me honest. They keep me connected to different problems, different users. If I only worked for Morgan, I'd start seeing the world the way you do. And that would be terrible. He meant it sarcastically, but her answer was serious. For me? Yes. For you too, though you don't see it yet. She softened the words with a small smile. You already have dozens of people who see the world exactly as you do. You don't need one more. Later that night, as they lay tangled in his sheets, the San Francisco skyline glittering beyond his windows, he'd confessed the truth that had been growing in him for months. You make me feel human, he told her, his voice low in the darkness. Everyone else sees the CEO, the billion-dollar brain. You just see me. Her fingers had traced the line of his jaw, her eyes studying him with an intimacy that had nothing to do with their physical relationship. "That's because you're more than your empire, Ash," she'd whispered against his skin. "You just don't know it yet." They were never officially a couple. Asher had been clear from the beginning that his life had no room for traditional relationships. His parents' toxic marriage had inoculated him against romantic illusions, and his singular focus on building Morgan Technologies left little emotional energy for anything else. Fiona had accepted his terms without complaint, seeming to understand his boundaries better than he did himself. She became his sounding board, his most trusted advisor, his secret refuge from the demands of his position. "I don't need promises or labels," she told him when he'd awkwardly tried to define what they were doing. "I just need honesty. Don't lie to me, don't hide things from me, and we'll be fine." And somewhere along the way, without quite realizing it, Asher had fallen in love with her, though he'd never used those words aloud. The beginning of the end came with the Nakamura deal. Japanese tech giant Nakamura Industries had agreed to a historic merger with Morgan Technologies that would give them unprecedented market share in Asia. The deal represented everything Asher had been working toward for years: global expansion, integration of Nakamura's revolutionary hardware with Morgan's software innovations, and a partnership that would cement his legacy beyond anything his father had achieved. There was just one condition from the traditional, family-oriented Japanese firm. Asher Morgan needed to project stability in his personal life. "They're essentially asking you to get engaged," his COO, Richard Vance, had explained during a tense executive meeting. The conference room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Nakamuras are old school. They want to merge with a family company led by a family man, not a playboy tech genius. "That's absurd," Asher had protested, loosening his tie in a rare display of agitation. "My personal life has nothing to do with this company's value or my ability to lead the merger." "It's not about value, it's about values," his communications director, Eliza Chen, had countered. "The Nakamuras come from a culture where family lineage and stability matter. They're not just merging technology, they're joining family legacies. And the convenient solution is right in front of us." She slid a folder across the table. "Victoria Reynolds has been practically begging for a public relationship with you for months. She's beautiful, connected, media-trained, and would make the perfect corporate wife." Asher had stared at the folder without opening it. Victoria Reynolds was the daughter of Senator William Reynolds, Harvard-educated and impeccably connected. They'd met at several charity galas over the past year, and she'd made her interest clear. She represented exactly the kind of strategic alliance his father would have approved of: beautiful, socially appropriate, and politically advantageous. "You want me to enter a fake engagement to close a business deal?" His voice was flat. "I want you to consider what's at stake," Richard said carefully. "The Nakamura merger would increase our market value by 40% overnight. It would give us technological capabilities we've been trying to develop in-house for years. It would secure your position as the most influential tech leader of your generation. And all it costs is my personal integrity." Eliza leaned forward. "It's not fake if you actually date her, Asher. Victoria is exactly the kind of woman you should be with, someone who understands this world, who can be an asset to your public image. Someone appropriate." The unspoken comparison to Fiona hung in the air. The executives knew about her, of course. It was impossible to keep secrets at that level. They knew she spent nights at his penthouse, knew she influenced his thinking. They also knew she refused to play the corporate game, declined to attend company events as his plus one, and maintained a professional independence that frustrated their PR efforts. "Take the weekend to think about it," Richard suggested, standing to signal the end of the meeting. "But remember, the Nakamuras want an answer by Wednesday. They have other potential partners if we can't meet their conditions." The decision had seemed logical at the time, a business arrangement with clear boundaries. Victoria Reynolds was the daughter of a senator, Harvard-educated and impeccably connected. A strategic alliance, nothing more. Asher had convinced himself that Fiona would understand, after all, they'd never made promises to each other, never discussed exclusivity or futures. The night he'd told her about the arrangement with Victoria, they'd been in his penthouse. Fiona was curled on the sofa, reviewing user test results for Morgan's latest app, her copper hair piled in a messy bun on top of her head. She looked comfortable, at home, utterly unaware that everything was about to change. "I need to tell you something," he'd said, setting his scotch down on the coffee table between them. She'd glanced up, registering his serious tone. "Okay. The Nakamura deal is contingent on some changes to my public image. They want reassurance about stability and family values." He'd rehearsed this speech, crafting it for maximum rationality and minimum emotional complication. "I'll be announcing an engagement to Victoria Reynolds next week. It's largely a business arrangement, but we'll need to be seen together publicly." Fiona's face had gone completely still. Not angry, not tearful, just utterly, terrifyingly blank. The user test results slipped from her fingers to the floor, pages scattering unnoticed. "I see," she'd said quietly. "You're making the practical choice." "It's just business, Fi," he'd explained, reaching for her hand across the coffee table. "Nothing between us has to change. This is about public perception, not my private life." She'd looked at him then with something like pity. "Everything already has." "This doesn't change how I feel about you," he'd insisted, uncomfortable with the growing hollowness in her eyes. "How do you feel about me, Asher?" Her voice was soft but direct. The question caught him off guard. They'd never discussed feelings, had deliberately avoided the emotional labels and declarations that complicated things. "You know you're important to me. That what we have is special." "Special." She repeated the word flatly. "But not special enough to choose over a business deal. That's not fair. This merger affects thousands of employees, billions in market value. It's bigger than just you and me. I'm not asking you to choose me over the merger. I'm pointing out that you've already made your choice, and it wasn't me. Fiona. You promised me one thing, Asher. Just one. Honesty." She stood up, wrapping her cardigan tighter around herself like armor. "So let's be honest now. You're entering a public relationship with Victoria Reynolds. You'll be photographed together, attend events together, play the devoted couple. Meanwhile, what am I in this scenario? The secret you keep on the side? The woman who warms your bed when the cameras aren't looking? It wouldn't be like that. Victoria understands this is an arrangement." Fiona's laugh held no humor. "So all three of us would be lying. That's so much better. You're overreacting. This doesn't have to change anything fundamental between us." She'd stared at him for a long moment, something shifting behind her eyes, some final door closing. "The fact that you believe that is exactly why I need to leave." The next morning, she was gone. No note, no dramatic confrontation, no tearful goodbye. Just empty drawers, returned key cards, and a formal resignation letter sent to HR. His calls went straight to voicemail. Her apartment had already been vacated. Her personal email bounced back messages. The few mutual friends they shared claimed ignorance of her whereabouts. It was as if Fiona West had vanished from the face of the earth. The Nakamura deal had gone through. Asher had gotten engaged to Victoria in a lavish ceremony covered by all the major business publications. His company's stock had soared. By every measurable metric, his life had improved after Fiona's departure. Except for the hollow feeling in his chest that nothing seemed to fill. The engagement lasted 8 months. Long enough to secure and implement the Nakamura merger, long enough for both Asher and Victoria to recognize they were performing roles rather than building a life together. The breakup was amicable but public, generating the expected tabloid speculation and temporary stock fluctuations. Victoria moved on to a European diplomat within weeks. Asher buried himself in the technical challenges of integrating two corporate giants. And still, in quiet moments, he found himself wondering where Fiona had gone, what she was doing, why she had disappeared so completely instead of fighting for what they had shared. It took 5 years and a random algorithm suggestion on a social media platform he rarely used to provide the devastating answer. The Manhattan address his investigator had uncovered led to a converted warehouse in Brooklyn, now home to an artists' collective called Westlight Studios. Asher's driver pulled the sleek black Bentley to the curb, looking comically out of place among the bicycles and hybrid cars that lined the street. The industrial building had been transformed with colorful murals and large windows, the entire block radiating a creative energy that contrasted sharply with the corporate sterility Asher inhabited daily. "Wait here," Asher instructed his driver, straightening the cuffs of his bespoke suit jacket. 5 years of searching had led to this moment. 5 years of private investigators hitting dead ends, of searching faces in crowds, of waking from dreams where he held a child he'd never met. The engagement to Victoria had ended after 8 excruciating months, once the Nakamura deal was finalized and irreversible. The tabloids had painted him as the heartless billionaire who'd used a senator's daughter for business advantage. They weren't entirely wrong. Westlight Studios occupied 3 floors of the renovated industrial space. The ground floor held a gallery filled with sculptures and installations that Asher barely glanced at as he made his way to the front desk. His focus was singular, his heartbeat uncomfortably fast in his chest. "I'm looking for Fiona West," he said to the young man with multiple piercings who looked up from his sketch pad. "Appointment?" the man asked, not appearing particularly impressed by Asher's obvious wealth or commanding presence. "No. Is she here?" "Ms. West only sees people by appointment for consultations or gallery inquiries. Tell her Asher Morgan is here." He watched the recognition flash across the young man's face, the widening eyes and sudden alertness that always accompanied his name. "Wait here." The assistant disappeared through a door behind the desk, returning moments later with visible discomfort. "3rd floor, Studio 12. She said to send you up." Each step up the industrial staircase felt like moving through time, back towards something he'd lost and forward towards something unknown. The hallway was lined with studios, each with a number and name plate. Creative energy hummed from behind partially open doors, artists painting, designers sketching, photographers examining contact sheets. Studio 12's door stood slightly ajar, the sound of children's laughter spilling out. Asher paused, his hand frozen before knocking. For a man who made billion-dollar decisions without hesitation, who directed the professional lives of thousands of employees, who had faced down corporate rivals and hostile takeovers, he suddenly found himself terrified. He pushed the door open. The studio was flooded with natural light from massive windows, the walls covered in vibrant murals and abstract paintings. Design mock-ups and storyboards occupied one section, photography equipment another. In the center of the room, a small boy with dark curls was spinning in circles, arms outstretched, while Fiona crouched nearby with a professional camera, capturing his joyful motion. "Higher, Mama." "I'm flying," the boy exclaimed, his voice sending a shock of recognition through Asher's body. The cadence, the timbre, it was eerily like his own childhood voice in home videos his mother had kept. "You're already touching the stars, my love," Fiona replied, her voice unchanged from Asher's memories, still carrying that blend of warmth and intelligence that had first drawn him to her. Neither had noticed him yet. For a precious few seconds, Asher simply watched them, this woman who had haunted his dreams for 5 years, and the boy who shared his blood. His son. The word felt foreign and sacred in his mind. The boy stopped spinning suddenly, catching sight of the stranger in the doorway. "Mama," he said, pointing toward Asher with childish directness. Fiona turned, her camera lowering slowly as her eyes met Asher's. 5 years melted away in an instant. She looked both exactly the same and completely different, her copper hair was shorter, cut in a stylish bob that framed her face. The uncertain young woman had been replaced by someone more confident, more grounded. More beautiful than he remembered. Asher, she said, rising to her feet and instinctively moving closer to the boy. How did you find us? With considerable difficulty, he replied, unable to tear his gaze from the child who was studying him with curious indigo eyes. You disappeared thoroughly. That was the point. The boy tugged at her sleeve. Who's that, Mama? Fiona's expression softened as she looked down at her son. This is Mr. Morgan, Leo. He's someone I used to work with. You have eyes like mine, the boy, Leo, observed, staring at Asher with disarming directness. Yes, Asher managed, his throat constricting with emotion. I suppose I do. An uncomfortable silence stretched between the adults, filled with 5 years of unspoken words. Fiona finally broke it, kneeling down to Leo's level. Sweetheart, can you go to Uncle Milo's studio for a few minutes? I need to talk to Mr. Morgan alone. But we were making flying pictures, Leo protested, his lower lip pushing out in a small pout. We'll finish after. This is important. She kissed his forehead. Studio 8, straight to Uncle Milo, nowhere else. Promise to finish the flying pictures. Promise. They watched as Leo reluctantly left the studio, his small sneakers squeaking against the concrete floor. When the door closed behind him, Fiona turned to Asher, arms crossed defensively. Why are you here? She asked, though they both knew the answer. He's my son. Asher stated it as the incontrovertible fact it was. Biologically, yes. Were you ever going to tell me? Fiona moved toward the windows, putting space between them. I considered it, in the beginning. Then I saw the engagement announcement. Your perfect strategic alliance with Victoria Reynolds, splashed across every business publication. Your triumphant Nakamura merger. Her voice remained calm, controlled. You made your choice, Asher. I made mine. You had no right to keep him from me. Anger flared, hot and bright. Didn't I? She turned to face him, her composure cracking slightly. You made it abundantly clear that family wasn't in your life plan. That business came first, always. What was I supposed to do? Become the inconvenient pregnant ex who threatened your perfect arrangement? You should have told me. Why? So you could offer financial support while continuing your perfect CEO life. So you could see him on scheduled weekends between board meetings. She shook her head. Leo deserved better than being an obligation. He deserved his father. Asher's voice broke on the last word, surprising them both. Fiona studied him, really seeing him perhaps for the first time since he'd entered. You're not engaged anymore. No. That ended years ago. I'm sorry, she offered, though she didn't sound particularly sorry. Don't be. It was never real. Asher took a step closer. Nothing has been real since you left. Something flickered in her eyes before she looked away. What do you want from us, Asher? Why are you really here? The question hung in the air between them, demanding honesty Asher wasn't sure he was capable of. What did he want? Custody fights? Co-parenting arrangements? Or something more fundamental? The family he'd never admitted to wanting, the woman he'd never properly valued until she was gone. I want to know my son, he finally said, choosing the simplest truth. And I want a chance to understand why you left the way you did. You know why I left. I thought I did. But looking at Leo, I'm not sure I understood anything at all. Fiona's expression softened slightly. He just turned 4 last month. He loves dinosaurs and airplanes and anything that moves. He asks why about 100 times a day. He has your analytical mind and your stubbornness. A small, reluctant smile touched her lips. And obviously your eyes. He's incredible, Asher said softly. You've done an amazing job with him. I've done everything for him. The words carried both pride and accusation. I want to be part of his life, Fiona. Asher moved closer, careful to maintain a respectful distance. I understand you're angry with me, and you have every right to be. But please don't punish him for my mistakes. Is that what you think I'm doing? Punishing him? Her eyes flashed. I've protected him. I've given him stability and love and a life free from confusion about why his father might sometimes fit him into his busy schedule and other times cancel because the market's shifted. That's not fair. You never gave me the chance to be different for him. The man I knew wasn't capable of putting anyone ahead of Morgan Technologies. Not even himself, let alone a child. The assessment stung all the more for its accuracy. People change, Fiona. Do they? Or do they just want what they suddenly realize they can't have? Before Asher could respond, a small voice called from the doorway. Mama, Uncle Milo says he needs to talk to you about the Reynolds project. They both turned to see Leo standing there, his curious eyes moving between the adults. The name, Reynolds, sent an uncomfortable jolt through Asher. A reminder of Victoria, of choices made and consequences felt. Tell Uncle Milo I'll be there in a few minutes, sweetheart. Fiona's voice softened as she addressed her son. Leo nodded but didn't leave. Instead, he looked directly at Asher. Do you like dinosaurs, Mr. Morgan? The simple question, so childish and yet so profound in its normalizing effect, caught Asher off guard. I do, actually. T-Rex was my favorite when I was about your age. Leo's face lit up. Mine too. They had the biggest teeth ever. He demonstrated with his fingers curved into claws at his mouth. But Mama says they had tiny arms so they couldn't brush their teeth. That's why they were so grumpy. Despite the tension of the moment, Asher found himself smiling. Your mama is very smart about many things. The smartest, Leo agreed solemnly. She knows everything. Almost everything, Fiona corrected gently. Now go back to Uncle Milo, please. Mr. Morgan and I need to finish our conversation. When Leo had reluctantly left again, Asher turned back to Fiona. He's extraordinary, Fi. He's so much like you, that curiosity, that brightness. He has plenty of you in him too. The way he focuses on problems until he solves them. The way he builds elaborate structures with his blocks and gets frustrated when they're not perfect. She sighed. What do you want from this, Asher? Really? Because if you think you can just walk into our lives and append everything we've built. I want the chance to know him. To be a father to him in whatever way you're comfortable with. Asher ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty. I've spent 5 years feeling like something essential was missing from my life. Now I understand why. And what happens when the novelty wears off? When being a father interferes with some crucial business deal? When he needs you at a school event but the board is waiting? I'll choose him. Every time. You say that now, but I've changed, Fiona. Not just because I found out about Leo, but over these past years. The Nakamura merger that seemed so important. It fell apart 18 months in. Victoria and I were a PR disaster that cost shareholders millions. All these essential business priorities I sacrificed everything for have proven remarkably temporary. Fiona studied him, her expression guarded but thoughtful. You hurt me deeply, Asher. You made me feel disposable, like I was convenient until something better came along. I know. And I've regretted it every day since. He took a deep breath. I'm not asking for your forgiveness or for us to go back to what we had. I'm asking for the chance to be the father that Leo deserves. And if I say no, then I'll respect your decision. But I hope you won't. Asher met her eyes directly. He should have the choice to know me, even if I don't deserve it. The studio fell silent as Fiona considered his words. Outside, the sounds of Brooklyn continued, traffic, distant sirens, the rhythmic beats of music from a nearby studio. Inside, two people who had once known each other intimately tried to navigate a future neither had anticipated. "I need time to think about this," Fiona finally said. "And to consider what's best for Leo." "Of course. I'm not promising anything." "I understand." She moved toward the door, signaling the end of their conversation. "I'll call you in a few days. Leave your number with Zach at the front desk." As Asher walked back down the industrial staircase, his mind raced with the implications of what had just happened. He had a son. A brilliant, beautiful 4-year-old who shared his eyes and apparently his fascination with dinosaurs. A child who had lived 4 years without him, who didn't know him as anything but a stranger his mother once worked with. The loss of those years hit him with physical force as he reached the ground floor. First steps, first words, first everything, moments he would never get back. The price of choices made without understanding their true cost. But there was also possibility stretching before him. The chance to be part of Leo's life going forward, to build a relationship with this extraordinary child. To perhaps, someday, earn back some measure of trust from the woman he had hurt so carelessly. As his driver opened the car door, Asher took one last look at Westlight Studios. Somewhere inside, Fiona West was building a successful life without him, raising their son with courage and love. She didn't need him. That much was clear from the confidence in her stance, the success evident in her surroundings. But maybe, just maybe, she might let him prove he could be worthy of the family he never knew he wanted until it was almost too late. If you're captivated by Asher's journey to win back his family, hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if you were in Fiona's position? Would you give Asher a second chance? Subscribe to Mr. Beaumont's Enchanted Love Stories for the next part of this emotional tale, where we'll see whether some mistakes can be redeemed and if true love deserves a second chance. Your support helps bring more stories like this to life. In the days that followed, an uneasy truce formed between Asher and Fiona. True to her word, she called him 3 days after their confrontation, setting clear boundaries for how he might begin to know Leo. Asher had rented a penthouse in Brooklyn, postponing his return to San Francisco indefinitely. Morgan Technologies could run without him physically present, he had built systems precisely for that purpose. "My company can operate from anywhere," he told Fiona during a tense phone call. "Leo is here. That makes this the only place I need to be." Her silence on the other end spoke volumes, a mixture of skepticism and reluctant appreciation. "We'll start with one supervised meeting. In public. If that goes well, we can discuss next steps." Their first official meeting took place at a playground near Fiona's apartment, neutral territory where Leo could run and play while the adults navigated their complicated history. Asher arrived early, oddly nervous in a way business negotiations never made him feel. He dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, trying to blend in with the other parents rather than stand out as the billionaire CEO the business world knew him as. When Fiona arrived with Leo, the boy spotted Asher immediately and waved with the uninhibited enthusiasm of childhood. "It's the man with my eyes," he called out, loud enough for several nearby parents to turn curiously. Inside voice, "Leo," Fiona reminded him gently, though her cheeks colored slightly. She looked different in this setting, more relaxed in jeans and a simple green sweater that matched her eyes, her copper hair caught back in a ponytail. More like the Fiona he'd first met than the polished studio owner he'd confronted days earlier. "Hi, Leo," Asher said, kneeling down to the boy's level. "It's nice to see you again. Mama said you're going to play with me today. Do you like swings? I can go super high. I love swings. And I bet you can go higher than I can. Race you." And just like that, Leo was off, running toward the playground with the boundless energy of childhood. Fiona and Asher followed more slowly, settling on a bench with a clear view of the play equipment. An awkward silence stretched between them until Fiona finally spoke. He loves dinosaurs, she explained as they watched Leo climbing on the play structure. And anything that flies, birds, planes, superheroes. He asks questions about everything, never stops talking once he feels comfortable with you. He's extraordinary, Asher said quietly. You've done an amazing job with him. Thank you. She accepted the compliment with quiet dignity. It hasn't always been easy, but it's been worth every second. How did you manage? Financially, I mean. The question slipped out before Asher could consider how it might sound. Fiona's expression cooled slightly. You might be surprised to learn I'm quite successful, Asher. Westlight Studios is mine. I founded it 3 years ago with seed money from an innovation grant. We do design consultancy for tech companies, commercial art, and run artist residency programs. Leo and I do just fine. I never doubted your capabilities, Asher said carefully in response to Fiona's declaration of financial independence. I just wish I could have helped. That's the thing, Asher. I needed to know I could do it myself. She watched her son with fierce love in her eyes. For both of us. Leo called from the top of the slide, "Watch me, Mama. Watch me, Mr. Morgan," before sliding down with his arms raised triumphantly above his head. Great job. Asher called, surprised by how naturally the encouragement came. Leo beamed at him before running back to the ladder for another turn. He's so fearless, Asher observed. Too fearless sometimes, Fiona said with a small smile. He broke his arm last year trying to fly off the sofa. The pediatrician says it's normal for boys his age, but it nearly gave me a heart attack. My mother used to say the same about me. Apparently, I tried to climb the bookshelves in my father's study and brought the whole thing down. Still have the scar. Asher unconsciously touched his right eyebrow. Fiona's eyes widened slightly. Leo has the same scar. From the monkey bars at daycare. The shared genetic mark hung between them like physical evidence of what they both already knew. This child was undeniably part of both of them. As Leo played, darting from swings to slides to climbing structures with boundless energy, Asher and Fiona found themselves sharing small details about him. His favorite foods, anything with cheese, his hatred of green vegetables, his incredible memory for dinosaur facts, his stubborn streak when learning to tie his shoes. He insists on doing everything himself, Fiona said. Even when it would be easier to let me help. Can't imagine where he gets that from, Asher replied with a wry smile. For a brief moment, the tension between them eased, and they were just two people who shared a remarkable child, finding common ground in their mutual admiration of him. When the playground visit ended, Leo surprised both adults by throwing his arms around Asher's legs in a spontaneous hug. Bye, Mr. Morgan. Will you come play again? I can show you my dinosaurs next time. Asher glanced at Fiona, unwilling to make promises he couldn't keep. She gave a small nod. I'd like that very much, Leo, Asher said, his throat tight with emotion. Later that week, Asher had his first solo outing with Leo, a carefully supervised trip to the Natural History Museum. Fiona had agreed to let Asher pick Leo up from her apartment, but she'd been clear about the boundaries. 3 hours. He needs lunch at noon, and he gets cranky if he misses his afternoon snack. Call me if there's any problem at all. I've negotiated billion-dollar deals with temperamental executives, Fi. I think I can handle a museum trip with a 4-year-old. Billion-dollar executives don't have meltdowns because their juice box is the wrong flavor. But she smiled as she said it, the first genuine smile he'd seen directed at him since his return to her life. At the museum, Leo led the way with confident familiarity, heading straight for the dinosaur exhibit. Standing beside the massive T-Rex skeleton, watching his son's face illuminate with wonder, Asher felt something shift inside him, as if puzzle pieces long misaligned were finally clicking into place. Did you know T-Rexes couldn't run very fast? Leo informed him seriously. Their legs would break if they ran too hard. I didn't know that, Asher replied, equally serious. That's fascinating. Mama says sometimes the scariest looking things aren't actually the most dangerous. It's the quiet ones you have to watch out for. Leo looked up at him with those Morgan eyes. Are you dangerous, Mr. Morgan? The question, so innocent yet so piercing, caught Asher completely off guard. I don't think so. Why do you ask? Because Mama gets a funny look when she talks about you. Like she's happy and sad at the same time. Children, Asher was quickly learning, saw through pretenses that adults had spent lifetimes constructing. This child, his child, seemed particularly gifted at it. Sometimes grown-ups have complicated feelings about each other, he explained carefully. But I want you to know that I'm very happy to be getting to know you. Leo considered this. Can I ask you something else? Anything. Are you my dad? The world seemed to stop around them. Museum visitors continued moving past, dinosaur bones continued their silent vigil, but Asher felt suspended between heartbeats. What makes you ask that? He managed finally. We have the same eyes. And Mama has pictures of you she thinks I don't know about. And sometimes she calls me Little Morgan when she's tired. Leo listed his evidence matter-of-factly. Plus, Uncle Milo said a rich man in a fancy car doesn't show up for no reason. Asher knelt to Leo's level, their identical eyes meeting. He thought about lying, about deferring to Fiona, about protecting the careful boundaries they'd established. But looking into his son's earnest face, he couldn't bring himself to start their relationship with a lie. Would it be okay with you if I was your dad? He asked softly. Leo tilted his head, considering the question with endearing seriousness. Do you know how to make pancakes? Mamas always burn. A laugh escaped Asher's throat, unexpected and genuine. I can learn. Good. Leo nodded decisively. Then it's okay. When Asher brought Leo back to Fiona's apartment that evening, the boy ran straight to his mother with excitement. Mama! We saw all the dinosaurs and Mr. Morgan, I mean Dad, is going to learn to make pancakes. Fiona froze, her startled gaze flying to Asher's. What did you just call him? Dad, Leo said simply. That's what he is, right? We talked about it. Leo, sweetie, go change out of your museum clothes while I talk to Mr. Morgan, okay? When they were alone, Fiona's calm facade cracked. You had no right to tell him without discussing it with me first. I didn't tell him, Asher explained quickly. He figured it out himself. He's incredibly perceptive, Fiona. He had all the pieces, our eyes, the pictures he's found, even overhearing you call him Little Morgan. I couldn't lie to him when he asked me directly. Fiona sank onto her sofa, suddenly looking exhausted. Of course he figured it out. He's too smart for his own good sometimes. She looked up at Asher. What exactly did he ask you? He asked if I was his dad. And then he asked if I knew how to make pancakes because yours always burn. A reluctant smile tugged at Fiona's lips. They do. I'm hopeless with pancakes. For what it's worth, I don't know how to make them either. But I promised to learn. How did you want it to happen? Asher asked gently after a moment. Were you ever planning to tell him about me? Eventually. When he was older. When I thought you wouldn't disappoint him. The word stung, but Asher couldn't deny their justice. I disappointed you. Yes. The simple admission hung between them. I've changed, Fi. Have you? Or do you just want what you suddenly realize you can't have? She looked up at him, the hurt of 5 years visible in her eyes. You didn't want a family then. You made that perfectly clear. I didn't know what I wanted, Asher admitted, sitting beside her. I was so focused on building something lasting that I couldn't see that legacy isn't just about business. My father spent his entire life building Morgan Technologies, and what did it get him? A son who barely knew him and a legacy that felt empty the moment I achieved it. And now? Now I know what matters. These past weeks with Leo, seeing the incredible person you've raised, understanding what I've missed, it's changed everything. He hesitated, then took her hand. I was obsessed with finding you both because I thought you'd stolen something from me. But the truth is, I gave you nothing to steal. I pushed away the only real thing in my life. What are you saying, Asher? I'm saying I want to be Leo's father, not just in biology but in reality. And I'm saying that I never stopped loving you, even when I was too blind to recognize it. Love, Fiona echoed softly. You never once used that word when we were together. I was a coward. Afraid that loving you made me vulnerable in ways I couldn't control. He interlaced his fingers with hers. I'm not asking for forgiveness, or for things to go back to how they were. I'm asking for a chance to be better than I was. To be the father Leo deserves, and maybe someday to be worthy of the love I threw away. Tears glistened in Fiona's eyes. I built a life without you, Ash. A good life. I can't risk Leo's happiness on promises you might not keep. Then let me prove it, day by day. Asher's voice was raw with emotion. I've moved the company headquarters to New York. I've restructured the entire executive team so I can be present, really present, not just a voice on conference calls. I'm not asking you to believe words, I'm asking you to watch actions. Before she could respond, Leo bounded back into the room in dinosaur pajamas. Can Dad stay for dinner? I want to show him my room. Fiona looked at her son's hopeful face, then at Asher's equally vulnerable expression. Something softened in her eyes, not surrender, but perhaps the beginning of possibility. Dinner, she agreed quietly. We can start with dinner. If you believe in the power of second chances and redemption, give this video a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Would you give someone a second chance after they hurt you, or is some damage irreparable? Subscribe to Mr. Beaumont's Enchanted Love Stories for more tales that explore the complicated, beautiful mess that is human love. Your support means the world to this channel. The weeks that followed established a new rhythm in their lives. Asher became a regular presence, first with scheduled visits, then with more flexible arrangements as Fiona's trust cautiously grew. He attended Leo's preschool events, learned about his routines and preferences, and slowly became a father rather than just a biological fact. The corporate world watched in bewilderment as Asher Morgan, notorious workaholic and ruthless CEO, suddenly began delegating responsibilities he'd previously insisted only he could handle. The temporary New York office became permanent. Board meetings were scheduled around Leo's school performances rather than the other way around. Mr. Morgan has declined the Tokyo conference, his assistant reported to the executive team during one particularly tense meeting. He's attending his son's dinosaur-themed birthday party instead. His what? Richard Vance, still COO after all these years, nearly choked on his coffee. The news of Asher Morgan's secret son hit the business media like a bombshell, generating speculation and gossip that would normally have sent the PR team into damage control mode. But Asher, to everyone's surprise, seemed completely unconcerned with the coverage. My personal life is exactly that, personal, he told Richard when pressed about managing the story. The only people whose opinions matter to me now are Leo and Fiona. For Leo, the transition was seamless with the natural adaptability of childhood. He accepted Asher as "Dad" without hesitation, bombarding him with questions about everything from how tall buildings stayed up to why the sky changed colors at sunset. He proudly introduced Asher to his friends at preschool, declared him the best pancake maker ever, after several disastrous early attempts, and absorbed Asher into his life with the unquestioning acceptance only children can offer. For Fiona, the process was understandably more complicated. The wounds Asher had inflicted ran deep, and trust once broken wasn't easily rebuilt. She watched his interactions with Leo carefully, waiting for the moment his attention would waver, for business to reclaim its priority in his life. But it didn't happen. Week after week, Asher showed up, not just physically, but emotionally present in a way he'd never been during their previous relationship. He listened when Leo talked, really listened, instead of mentally calculating stock fluctuations. He remembered details about preschool friends and favorite books. He built elaborate blanket forts and didn't check his phone once during their construction. "You're different with him," Fiona observed one evening as they cleaned up after dinner. Leo was in the living room, carefully explaining a complex Lego creation to his stuffed dinosaur. "I'm different, period," Asher replied, handing her a plate to dry. "He deserves the best version of me. So do you." "I've never seen this version before. It didn't exist before. I didn't know how to be this person until I had something worth changing for." One rainy Saturday, while Leo napped after an energetic morning at the Children's Museum, Fiona found Asher studying the photographs displayed throughout her apartment. There was a timeline of Leo's life, infant photos, first steps, preschool portraits, but also older images. Her parents, now retired in Florida. Friends from college. And tucked almost out of sight on a bookshelf, a single photo of Asher and Fiona from before everything fell apart. "I remember this day," Asher said softly as she approached. In the photo, they were at a small coastal town north of San Francisco, his arm around her shoulders, both laughing at something off camera. "That little seafood place with the terrible service but the best clam chowder on the coast. You convinced the chef to give you his secret recipe." Fiona smiled at the memory. "Claimed it was for research purposes. I still make that chowder sometimes. It never tastes the same." Fiona studied him, the profile that had once been as familiar to her as her own reflection. "Why did you keep that picture?" Asher asked, turning to face her. "Because even after everything, that day was real." She hesitated, then added more softly, "Because I needed Leo to have at least one image of his parents together, even if he never knew it." Asher's hand reached for hers, hesitant, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. "I was the happiest I'd ever been, back then," he confessed. "And too blind to recognize it. We can't go back to those people, Ash. Too much has happened. I don't want to go back. Those people were incomplete. That version of me didn't understand what mattered. I want to go forward, with everything we've learned, everything we've become." Leo's voice called from the other room, breaking the moment between them. But something had shifted, some small but significant thawing of the ice between them. 3 months into his new life in New York, Asher faced the inevitable collision between his past and present. Victoria Reynolds, now Victoria Harrington after her marriage to the British diplomat, reached out requesting a meeting about a potential collaboration between Morgan Technologies and her husband's diplomatic foundation. "I should decline," Asher told Fiona when he received the email. They were at his Brooklyn penthouse, now transformed from its original minimalist design to accommodate Leo's frequent visits. Colorful artwork, mostly dinosaur-themed, adorned walls that had once displayed only abstract art selected by a decorator. "Why?" Fiona looked up from her laptop, where she'd been reviewing designs for a new client. "It's been years, and it sounds like a legitimate business opportunity. It feels complicated. Given our history." Fiona closed her laptop. "Are you worried about my reaction, or yours?" "Yours," he admitted. "I don't want you to think that there's anything there. Asher, I know exactly why you were with Victoria. It was never about love or connection, it was about appearances and strategic advantage. That hurt me deeply then, but now." She shrugged. "She's just someone from your past who's moved on with her life, as we all have." The meeting with Victoria took place at Morgan's New York headquarters. She arrived looking every inch the diplomat's wife in a tailored suit, her blonde hair swept into an elegant chignon. "You look well, Asher," she said after pleasantries were exchanged. "Fatherhood suits you." "Thank you. Marriage seems to agree with you as well." Victoria smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. Funny how things work out, isn't it? We tried so hard to make something work that was never meant to be, and now we've both found what actually fits. Have I? Asher asked, more to himself than to her. Haven't you? Victoria raised a perfectly shaped eyebrow. I've seen the photos in the business section. The three of you at that charity gala last month. You've never looked at me, or anyone else for that matter, the way you looked at her in that image. The observation stayed with Asher long after the meeting concluded, through the practical discussions of technology integration for diplomatic missions, through the formal handshakes and promises of follow-up. Had he been so transparent? And if a woman who knew him only superficially could see it, why couldn't Fiona? Or perhaps she could, and that was what frightened her. The answer came unexpectedly, during a conversation with Leo over ice cream at the park near Fiona's apartment. Uncle Milo says you love Mama, Leo announced between licks of his chocolate cone. Asher nearly choked on his own ice cream. Does he? Aha. He says that's why you came back and why you look at her like she hung the moon. Uncle Milo is very observant, Asher replied carefully. How would you feel if that were true? Leo considered this with his characteristic seriousness. I'd like it. Then we could all live together, and you could make pancakes every morning, and Mama wouldn't be sad anymore. Mama's sad. Not when you're around. But sometimes at night I hear her crying. She thinks I'm asleep, but I'm not. Leo's matter-of-fact delivery made the revelation all the more heartbreaking. I think she misses you when you're not there. The childish observation contained more insight than 1,000 business analyses Asher had commissioned over the years. It also provided the clarity he'd been seeking about how to move forward. 6 months after finding Fiona and Leo, Asher stood in his Brooklyn penthouse, nervously adjusting the decorations one last time. The apartment, once a showcase of minimalist luxury, had been transformed over the months of Leo's visits. Colorful artwork, some professionally framed, others clearly created by a child's hand, adorned the walls. Photographs chronicled months of gradual family building. Leo riding on Asher's shoulders in Central Park, the three of them at Leo's preschool science fair, quiet moments of connection captured when no one thought the camera was watching. Today was Asher's birthday, the first he'd celebrated since reconnecting with Fiona and discovering Leo. He'd insisted on something small and personal, just the three of them, rather than the elaborate corporate events that had marked previous birthdays. The doorbell rang, and Asher took a deep breath before answering. Leo burst in first, carrying a carefully wrapped package. Happy birthday, Dad. We made you something. His enthusiasm was contagious, his small face alight with excitement. Behind him, Fiona entered more slowly, carrying a homemade cake. Their eyes met over Leo's head, communicating in the silent language they'd been rebuilding these past months. You baked? Asher asked, genuinely surprised. I thought cooking was my department now. I can manage a cake, she replied with a small smile. No guarantees on how it tastes, but it's made with love. These family gatherings had become sacred ritual, evolving from cautious politeness to genuine warmth as Asher proved week after week that his commitment to fatherhood was unwavering. He had learned to make pancakes, without burning them, had become a fixture at school events, had built a life that prioritized people over profit margins. Make a wish. Leo instructed as Asher prepared to blow out the candles. Looking at his son's eager face and Fiona's cautiously hopeful eyes, Asher realized he didn't need to wish for anything. Everything that mattered was already here, giving him a second chance he'd never expected and couldn't believe he deserved. Later, after Leo had fallen asleep watching a documentary about falcons, Fiona joined Asher on the balcony overlooking the Brooklyn skyline. The evening was cool but pleasant, the city lights creating a glittering backdrop to their conversation. He loves you, she said quietly. I never thought I'd see the day. I love him more than I knew was possible, Asher admitted. Thank you for allowing me to be part of his life. You've earned it. She turned to face him. You're not the man I left 5 years ago. No. That man was a fool who didn't recognize what was right in front of him. Asher hesitated, then asked the question that had lingered between them for months. What about us, Fi? Is there any chance for something more than co-parenting? Fiona's gaze was steady, her voice soft but certain. I never stopped loving you, Ash. Even when I hated you for what you did, even when I was determined to build a life without you, I never stopped loving you. But I needed to become someone who wouldn't be destroyed by losing you again. And have you? Yes. A small smile touched her lips. I'm not the same woman either. I won't disappear into your life or your needs. I have my own company, my own strength. I wouldn't want you to be anything but exactly who you are. Asher moved closer, his heart racing with a vulnerability no business negotiation had ever created. I love who you've become. I love the family you created. I love that you're strong enough to stand completely on your own, and I'm hoping you might choose to stand with me instead. In answer, Fiona closed the distance between them, her lips finding his in a kiss that felt like coming home and embarking on a new journey all at once. Against the backdrop of the city they'd both claimed as their own, they sealed a promise that had taken 5 years, one extraordinary child, and countless moments of growth to fulfill. 1 year later, Leo Morgan stood proudly between his parents on another Brooklyn rooftop, this one decorated with twinkling lights and white flowers. At 5 years old, he took his role as ring bearer with utmost seriousness, carefully delivering the rings when prompted by Uncle Milo, who officiated the small ceremony. I present to you, for the first time, the Morgan family, Milo announced to the gathered friends and colleagues. Asher, Fiona, and Leo. As they moved through the reception, accepting congratulations and well wishes, Asher found himself continually drawn back to his new wife and their son, unable to believe his good fortune. The road to this moment had been long and difficult, marked by mistakes and hard lessons, but standing here now, he wouldn't change a single step. Happy? Fiona asked, catching him watching her from across the room. Beyond words, he replied, drawing her close. You gave me the greatest gift when you brought Leo into the world. But giving me a second chance. That was a miracle I didn't deserve. We deserve the love we're brave enough to fight for, she said softly. It just took us both time to learn how to be brave in the right ways. Below them, the city continued its eternal rhythm, people finding and losing each other, making choices that would define their futures, learning the difference between what they wanted and what they truly needed. But here, on this rooftop, one family had found its way home through the darkness, proving that sometimes the things we think we've lost forever are simply waiting for us to become worthy of finding them again. Do you think other people get second chances like we did? Asher asked later that night, as they swayed together for their first dance. I think second chances are always there, Fiona replied. But you have to be willing to become someone new to deserve them. As Leo joined them on the dance floor, demanding to be part of the moment, Asher lifted his son into his arms, completing their circle. The boy who had once been his greatest unknown became the bridge that led him back to love, to purpose, to the family he never knew he needed until he almost lost them forever. Not an ending, but a beginning, hard-earned, eyes wide open, hearts finally ready for the love they'd almost lost forever. If this story touched your heart, please hit the like button and subscribe to Mr. Beaumont's Enchanted Love Stories. Share in the comments a time when you had to choose between what seemed practical and what your heart truly wanted. Remember, sometimes the greatest treasures in life aren't the ones we pursue, but the ones waiting patiently for us to recognize their value. Your support helps bring more stories like this to life, stories that remind us it's never too late for love, for growth, and for second chances.